advisor Stephen Miller. There you see him on the left. And she is the second White House staffer to test positive for coronavirus this week. President Trump's personal valet also testing positive a few days ago. For more on this, let's bring in CNN White House reporter Sarah Westwood. Sarah, good to see you. So what kind of changes might be afoot at the White House in response to these developments?
Well, Fred, White House officials moved quickly yesterday to respond to the news that Katie Miller, Pence's press secretary, had tested positive. They quickly initiated that contact tracing. That is, they went back, they tested everyone who had come into contact with Katie recently, including her husband, Stephen Miller, that top White House advisor, and including a handful of Pence staffers who were actually on Air Force Two with Vice President Pence preparing to take off for a trip to Iowa when they received the news about Miller's test results. All of those people, thankfully, did test negative. Now, a senior administration official described to CNN some of the things that the White House will be doing to respond to this. So one of them is more frequent cleanings of White House spaces. Those were already getting sanitized. They're going to step up that sanitization. They're also going to step up COVID testing and temperature checks throughout the White House. Right now, you cannot get onto White House grounds unless you have a temperature check, but that does not catch people necessarily who are asymptomatic. CNN had reported earlier this week that testing within the White House was really limited to the people who were most closely around President Trump and Vice President Pence. That testing is going to be broadened. Also, CNN reported that compliance with mask and social distancing guidelines were not exactly being followed to the letter within the White House. Those are expected to be more strictly enforced. We should note that President Trump, Vice President Pence, they both stepped out of the White House this week, and neither of them wore masks while they were in public. Miller tweeted yesterday that she was feeling well and looking forward to getting back to work, Fred.
Sarah, I also understand that one of Ivanka Trump's personal assistants has also tested positive. What do we know about that person's circumstances and proximity to Ivanka Trump?
That's right. Technically, that assistant was the third White House official to test positive this week after Miller and the president's personal attendant, that valet. But Ivanka's assistant was not working inside the White House and had not been around Ivanka Trump for nearly 2 months. She had been teleworking, but nonetheless, out of an abundance of caution, that aide was tested. She had no symptoms, but she did test positive. Ivanka Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner, were also tested on Friday. Their tests both came back negative as well, Fred.
All right. Sarah Westwood, thank you so much. All right, since the start of the coronavirus outbreak here in the U.S., testing has been a pretty serious problem. Even now, as more tests become available, there are significant concerns about how accurate some of the kits are. Dr. Sanjay Gupta explains.
If you've heard anything lately about tests, it's that we haven't performed enough of them in the United States.
Today, everyone is so focused on getting tested, they miss the point that a bad test is worse than no test.
And that may be another more fundamental problem. Just how good are the tests in the first place?
The FDA basically has created a wild, wild west environment for this testing, where under their approval process on an emergency basis, they've let tests on the market that basically have a very, very wide range of results.
Michael Osterholm is director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota.
The quality of these tests right now vary a great deal, and that's a challenge in terms of understanding if you get a negative result, is it really negative?
A molecular diagnostic test can determine if you have actual virus inside of you by drawing a sample from your nasopharynx or from your saliva by spitting into a vial like I did, and then testing it for genetic traces of the virus. How well the test can find those genetic markers is known as sensitivity. If a test has poor sensitivity, it will result in too many false negative results. That means too many people testing negative for the virus when they are actually infected.
We undertook a study where we looked at over 200 specimens and tested them by all 5 methods. And there are differences between these tests.
Dr. Gary Prokoff is head of virology at the Cleveland Clinic. He and his team found 3 tests to have sensitivity over 95%. The one from the CDC, Cepheid, and Roche, meaning they caught nearly all but 5% of cases. But the highly touted Abbott ID Now test, which can give results in minutes, missed up to 15% of infected patients. Another study found that it potentially missed 25% of infections. And that's a concern, because despite their negative test results, those people are actually infected and can still spread the virus.
You would never want to use that test to screen somebody in the hospital to put them into a COVID negative unit, because in that case, you can't afford to make a mistake.
In a statement, Abbott said that the type of viral transport media, the chemical used to carry the virus sample, could be diluting samples. We immediately communicated with our customers that they should use the direct swab method. The findings of Prokoff's study are still yet to be peer-reviewed.
Just because we need something put out emergently doesn't mean we should put out things that don't work appropriately.
When asked if accuracy was sacrificed at the expense of speed, an FDA spokesperson told CNN FDA oversight doesn't end with an EUA, or emergency use authorization. We will continue to track these tests and take action if required. Obviously, testing is important. We've been talking about that for a long time, but not getting the infection is still the ultimate goal. So you want to do everything you can to protect yourself. We know in the White House now they're getting tested every day. That might in fact be too many tests. Every day maybe too frequently, but actually doing everything to slow down the spread within the White House, people wearing masks. I think that's something that we're going to have to see. Now, with regard to the tests themselves, there's a lot of people in the public health community that say the FDA needs to be making sure these tests are accurate, that they're validated. A bad test can be worse than no test at all.
Dr. Sanjay Gupta, thank you so much. All right, at least 2 children in New York have died after experiencing complications of an inflammatory syndrome that may be linked to the coronavirus. Health officials investigating after 73 pediatric patients across the state displayed symptoms similar to Kawasaki disease, which causes persistent fever, swelling of the hands and feet, and redness in both eyes. CNN's Evan McMorris-Santoro joining me now with more on this. Evan.
Hi. Yeah, we're expecting to hear from the governor later this afternoon. Well, actually, in just a few minutes, with some more information about what's going on here in New York. But the news so far is of a potentially scary nature. People here have been worried about the health effects on older people for the past couple of months, but there's been some conversation now that potentially there might be a potential that children could be getting a strange new disease involving inflammatory effects that have so far claimed the lives of 2 young boys. We learned yesterday, 2 boys under the age of 10. Now, it's very early days of this, and we've heard from one of the hospitals involved that it's still a very rare condition, but obviously it adds a new level of potential fear here in New York.
It's a big fear. All right, Evan McMorris-Santoro, thank you so much for that. All right, still ahead, as the coronavirus pandemic drags on, many businesses are facing an uncertain future and some tough decisions when and how to reopen after their states give them the green light. A live report next. And from false claims to false cures, tons of misinformation and outright lies about the virus are saturating the internet. What's being done to stop it, and who is being held accountable?
The coronavirus pandemic has changed the world, the way we live, work, and play.
Okay, let's do some quick draws.
As countries and companies join together to find creative and essential solutions to combat the virus, we look at the innovations being designed and used to protect lives.
Public health needs to modernize the approach that they're taking.
These are the technologies that will shape our world well beyond the pandemic.
Inventing Tomorrow, this weekend on CNN.
This is no factory. It's a classroom, the only busy room in this otherwise deserted secondary school in London. George Zavarian used to be a student here. When the pandemic halted the work of his medical device startup, he decided to put his skills to good use, making face shields.
Today we're delivering 10,000, which will be a huge help for our frontline workers.
He's joined by other former Latimer students, all back in school. They give the visors to hospitals for free, with raw material costs covered by grant funding.
It's nice to feel like you're helping a bit at least, and it's nice being back at school.
They've helped thousands of health workers across the country. And as 10,000 face shields get loaded here today, they'll soon be helping thousands more.
As the world continues to fight against the spread of COVID-19, most sports stadiums remain closed to competition. But that's not stopping some teams from putting their homes to good use in an effort to help their communities. In Spain, the kitchen of Atletico Madrid's Wanda Metropolitano Stadium is being used to prepare meals for families who are suffering the economic consequences of the pandemic. The stadium is equipped with 22 high-capacity industrial ovens and can prepare between 1,000 to 50,000 meals per day. Twickenham Stadium is the latest major sports stadium in England to be used to help fight the virus. The home of England's rugby team is using their car park as a drive-through testing centre in an effort to increase more testing for National Health Service staff and other key workers. For more information on how you can help during this pandemic, go to cnn.com/impact.
My name is Brenda Mundaka. I work in the health administration side of healthcare, and I live in Colorado. I decided to take over the basement. That way my girls know that if I am down here with the door shut, it means I am working, calling patients. They should not come in. If they want to play, they have to wait until I'm done. I'm typically done with my workday by 3 o'clock, so they still have plenty of hours in the afternoon to play if they are done with their homework. But I do make sure they go to bed later than they would regularly do once they were going to school, only because I start work at 6:30 in the morning. That way, if they go to sleep late, they wake up later. So I have a good 4 or 5 hours of work before they're even up. It's been a bit difficult only because, they were used to going out on the weekends, especially, or having friends come over or family. Their grandparents live nearby. Sometimes we drive by, we ask them to look out the window, and we just wait, maybe speak for about a minute, and then we come right back. I am a very, I do try to stay positive, but, not knowing how long it'll take for us to go back to sort of normal, or if we will ever, in the short term, be able to go back to what we used to consider normal. The best we can do for now is try to stay at home and not go out unless we really need to.
All right, this very sad news to bring to you. Cultural icon and founding father of rock and roll, Little Richard, died today. He was 87 years old. His son, Danny Penniman, confirmed the death, saying the cause is related to bone cancer. The legend is remembered for his 60-plus years in show business. George Howell looks back on his incredible career and how he changed music.
Little Richard changed the course of rock and roll history with that iconic song. He sang Tutti Frutti with Raw Inhibition, and it became a hit.
When I started in the business, I never heard rock and roll music before.
The singer who inspired the evolution of rock and roll was born Richard Wayne Penniman in Macon, Georgia in 1932. Even though his roots were deeply planted in gospel music, Little Richard signed with Specialty Records in 1955 and began his incredible journey to becoming a rock and roll icon. During the 50s, Little Richard made several more hit songs, including Long Tall Sally, Good Golly Miss Molly, and Lucille.
I always felt that I would be a star.
A star he certainly was. Little Richard even landed a part in the musical comedy The Girl Can't Help It in 1956. His flamboyant persona captivated audiences, and his soulful voice paired with his piercing screams made him a household name. However, at the height of his stardom, the self-proclaimed architect of rock and roll quit the music business. He became an ordained minister and traveled across the country as an evangelist and recorded gospel music between 1959 and 1963.
I went through those different periods, but I've always loved rock and roll.
During the late 60s and 70s, Little Richard returned to the spotlight and began recording rock and roll once again. His influence on many unknown artists at the time proved to be invaluable.
You know, the Beatles was with me. They started with me. James Brown was my vocalist. Jimi Hendrix was my guitar player, 18 years old. When you're rocking and rolling.
For a period of time, Little Richard lived the wild life of a rocker, but he never lost his faith. In 1985, the 52-year-old singer was involved in a car accident in Los Angeles and thanked God for saving his life.
Everything else is secondary. To have God, oh, glory to God.
He experienced a career resurgence in the 80s after landing a coveted role in Down and Out in Beverly Hills. Then Little Richard became one of the first icons to be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986.
I'm just glad to be alive at this time. I'm glad to be in Cleveland. I'm glad that I am the originator. I'm glad that I'm the architect of rock and roll. I'm glad that God has seen fit through his mercy to let me still be here.
In 1993, the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences awarded the fiery performer with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Little Richard, the showman, performed well into his twilight years.
After the pandemic, a new normal, experts weigh its impact on geopolitics.
여기까지 하겠습니다.
Plus a look at how our everyday
힘들어,
lives will
졸려요. 아,
change
왜 이렇게
in the
졸리지, 우리.
post-COVID-19 world. A Fareed Zakaria GPS special, Sunday on CNN.